the question about this ceasefire, if it lasts, is just what is it going to lead to? Will there be some kind of political process built upon it that might inch this country away from war or towards peace? Or will it simply be, as others have been, a time for armies to rest, to regroup, to resupply, and to get ready for the next round? Of course, the damage here is absolutely tragic, but the loss of human life, perhaps 400,000 dead in Syria over more than 5 years, that's much worse. These buildings were built strongly. A lot can be restored. You can't bring back all those who've died and the country that used to be here, the mix of peoples. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Aleppo.
Well, the United Nations envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, gave an update on the ceasefire a short while ago and on the critical importance for both sides to respect the safe passage of a World Food Programme convoy delivering aid to the stricken city of Aleppo. Here's what he said.
Every report we have been seeing indicates a significant drop in violence. Today, calm appears to have prevailed across Hama, Latakia, Aleppo city and rural Aleppo in Idlib, with only some allegations of sporadic and geographically isolated incidents. The Aleppo the Provincial Council needs to accept the fact that this aid is urgent, and on the Russian side, of course, helping this unhindered convoys approach, which we are understanding is being worked on.
Staffan de Mistura there. Murad Shishani from BBC Arabic is with me. Murad, 24 hours or so on, this does appear to be holding up.
Indeed, Karen, we might be witnessing a historic day in the contemporary history of Syria now. This is first day without someone being killed in the last 5 years, where killing numbers are increasing day by day. So it might turn to an historic day. Although this is very optimistic view. Now we know there's a sort of disagreements on implementation in certain areas, but everyone putting hope on a stake, saying that now there was no one killed due to fighting so far as we heard it. Now the thing is how to implement, how the aid reaching the people, and how to continue without fighting in these areas. That the major question everyone will be asking in next coming hours.
And while the bullets and the bombs have stopped, the priority immediately is to try to get help to certain people in certain areas where the conditions are unimaginable.
Indeed, there are devastated areas, loads of them, specifically Aleppo these days, and there are a sort of efforts to reach all these food and assistance immediately to these people in need. But the problem also, there's a sort of disagreement since Turkey announced they will be sending also this humanitarian aid. Syrian government refused that, saying they can't do that without consulting the UN. But we've heard there's unconfirmed reports that there are a movement of aids going into Syria now. We've just received that, and hopefully that will be carried on until next coming hours. However, we need to say that Turkey always wanted to create a sort of buffer zone. They call it a humanitarian buffer zone. These areas I've been witnessed them by myself. There are stuck many Syrians who fled Aleppo in the borders with Turkey, so they are in immediate and an urgent need. There was some charity organizations from Turkey going inside, but there was no organized massive effort to help them. But the people in need, they are massive, and this is the priority from international community, as they put it, for before continuing attacking ISIS or carrying on the political solution.
Very briefly, Murad, if this truce is held, what is the next step?
The next step, Sergei Lavrov and Kerry said they will intensify the attacks against IS and the jihadists of al-Nusra, so-called. Now they changed their name to Fatah al-Sham, but then they will open up for the political solution. But this is also, again, very optimistic view. Let's see first how the truce holds up, then the humanitarian aid, then we'll look to the political parties, how, and the fighting factions, how they react to what they can see today. As I said, it might be an historic moment.
Murad, thank you very much. Murad Shishani from BBC Arabic. Police in northern Germany have arrested 3 Syrian migrants suspected of preparing attacks for so-called Islamic State. The men, aged between 17 and 26, were detained after a series of pre-dawn raids in the German states of Schleswig-Holstein and Lower Saxony. The German Interior Minister says they were trafficked by the same organisation that supported the attackers who blew themselves up near the National Football Stadium just outside Paris in November. Jenny Hill has more from Berlin.
The security services are now investigating. There's a lot to do. The police have recovered a lot of material. We understand that among the bits and pieces they found were mobile phones, which were preloaded with communication apps. We don't have more detail than that, but we know that the phones are going to form a big part of the investigation as the security services try to get more information about these 3 men. We know that the security services tell us that one of the men, at the very least, had some kind of weapons training with IS, possibly out in Raqqa. We know that the men came into Germany towards the end of last year, that they came through the so-called Balkans route. As you can imagine, this has caused a great deal of consternation in Germany. No doubt the security services are congratulating themselves on a job well done, if you like. They've found these people, they've interrupted them at a stage before they'd actually got really to putting anything concrete together in terms of a terror attack. That's why they're being described as a sleeper cell. On the other hand, Germany is really nervous at the moment. There is a real public mood of concern about domestic security, and I suspect that these arrests, the acknowledgement at a very senior level that IS are using the refugee crisis to infiltrate Europe, to infiltrate Germany, will cause significant public concern. And I think, again, Angela Merkel, her government, has been trying to reassure the public that by, in effect, allowing hundreds of thousands of refugees into the country, that they haven't endangered German citizens. They're going to have to work really hard to reassure them now, I think.
Jenny Hill, well, Heiko Gerstmann is the mayor of Rheinfeldt, where one of today's raids was carried out at a refugee shelter.
You always fear the atmosphere will change. But I think our residents can see that this is an individual case, and not all refugees and asylum seekers are linked to the Islamic State. Some refugees have been integrated into families so well, they are almost like sons and daughters. So I don't think that the general atmosphere will be spoilt.
Now a look at some of the day's other news. Luxembourg's foreign minister says Hungary should be excluded from the European Union because of its tough anti-migrant policies. John Asselborn says the country is violating the EU's core values and is treating refugees almost like wild animals by erecting razor fences to keep them out. His Hungarian counterpart says Mr. Asselborn isn't worthy of consideration as a serious politician. A crew member's been killed and 4 others have been injured in an accident on the world's biggest cruise ship, the Harmony of the Seas. The sailors were taking part in a safety exercise while the boat was docked in the French port of Marseille. The Filipino national died when a lifeboat came away from its deck mountings and fell more than 10 metres down the side of the ship. UK scientists say early experiments suggest it may eventually be possible to make babies without using eggs. Researchers have succeeded in creating healthy baby mice by tricking sperm into believing they were fertilising normal eggs. The findings could mean 2 men could one day have a child without the need for eggs. The hosts of the Great British Bake Off have announced they will step down when the television show moves to Channel 4 next year. Sue Perkins and Mel Judridge have fronted the show since it began in 2010. In a statement, the duo say they were very shocked and saddened to learn Bake Off will be leaving the BBC. It's not yet known if judges Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood will stay with the show. Hillary Clinton says she didn't reveal she'd been diagnosed with pneumonia because she didn't think it would be a big deal. The Democratic presidential candidate staggered in public on Sunday morning as she left a 9/11 memorial ceremony, and that's caused a huge amount of debate over her health. Clinton said she'd been diagnosed on Friday but only informed a handful of close advisors and pressed on with the campaign. Let's go over to our correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue in Washington. So she didn't think it would be a big deal, Gary. How wrong she was.
Yeah, how wrong she was, because since that memorial service on Sunday morning, what are we now, Tuesday afternoon here in Washington, it's been absolutely wall-to-wall, the coverage of her her health problems, what it means, why she didn't tell anyone about it, when she'll be back on the trail, what effect it'll have on the campaign. All those questions swirling around, bouncing around cable news channels, the blogs, the media, the newspapers. Wherever you look, it's just the one issue that's being talked about. We're getting some suggestions, some early reports that it may be Friday when she gets back on the campaign, unconfirmed at this stage. Well, that would amount to the 5-day break she should have taken or was advised to take by her doctors when she decided to power on through, as she put it, before losing her balance, stumbling, staggering, however you want to call it, on Sunday, feeling dizzy, having to be bundled into the back of that car, helped into that back of that car by her aides, of course. So, yeah, a bit of a stumble in the campaign, unquestionably. A lot of people will be now focusing on the next set of medical records that the campaign have promised to release. And also, of course, Donald Trump himself. He's promised to release the results of a physical he had. He's doing a big interview with one of the TV doctors later this week. So that'll be a moment, I think, where the health of both candidates comes back into focus. The interesting thing here is that one of the things that Donald Trump's been trying to focus on the last couple of days, he's not really done any of the Hillary health stuff at all. He's let everyone else do that. He's been trying to focus on some comments she made on Friday night when she talked about half of his supporters being in the basket of deplorables. Now, that was a pretty elementary kind of political mistake. You can insult the people you're running against as much as you like. Insult the voters is really not what you do in normal politics. So I think in some ways there's a double-edged sword here for Donald Trump. Yes, everyone's been talking about Hillary's health and whether it's questionable, but it's also it's meant that people aren't really talking about something that was also a big problem for her, dismissing half the American electorate potentially.
Gary, thank you very much. Gary O'Donoghue in Washington. And of course, if you want to catch up on all the latest in the US and the election trail, you can keep right up to date on our website. There are all the latest stories, including this special feature on the history of the poor health of US presidents, from a leader who snuck a surgeon on a yacht in order to remove a tumour to another who died only months into his 4th term after hiding a great number of ailments from the public eye. All that on bbc.com/news. Now, for an amazing exhibition here in London that sees art and technology collide, volunteers at the Royal Academy of Arts are being converted into 3D portraits and put on display in its hallowed galleries. The Veronica scanner is the brainchild of Factum Arte in Madrid, and I had the opportunity to go along to be turned into a work of art. Not a science lab, but in fact London's Royal Academy of Arts. Here, a team from Madrid, who usually tour the world scanning antiquities from archaeological sites, are using their advanced 3D technology to immortalise real live members of the public. Thank you. It's time. Today, it's my turn. So, into the Veronica scanner, named from the Greek and Latin words for true likeness. It takes 96 high-resolution pictures of my head from every angle. Thank you. That was interesting. It was like being in some sort of space capsule, but it was over really quickly, just 4 seconds of flashes. But what place does advanced computer technology have in an esteemed venue for the arts?
So over the last 20 years, there's been an explosion in the technologies of 3D printing. And so it seemed, could we actually play with the idea of going all the way through, from recording someone to carving them in wood or to 3D printing them live? And could we also show what was possible if you do things at the highest resolution that takes much longer?
Of course, there's no actual artist involved. This is a completely objective portrayal of the subject, a bit like the busts we saw in classical times.
The technology and the appearance is radical and it's incredibly contemporary, but actually the physical objects are relatively conservative and certainly in that classical tradition. And I think that's what's interesting for art as far as this is concerned. This is only the beginnings. In other words, I think artists will use this technology in very interesting ways in the future.
And this is what emerges, the image from the screen turned into a bust using a variety of different materials, including wood, with 3D printing techniques, then exhibited in the Royal Academy itself. I wonder how mine will turn out. Now, the finished article has finally arrived from the Royal Academy, and I can honestly say I have not seen it. We've waited for this moment to unveil it and to actually get my real reaction for the first time. Here we go. This is so strange. Wow. It's so bizarre to see yourself like this. I can honestly say I'm very honoured to have been immortalised in such a way. And this has all been done through the computer and through this incredible 3D wooden carving machine. Well, that was the big version. Here is the tiny version. A bit less strange to see it. It came out of the 3D printer that they had there in the Royal Academy. The detail on it, though, despite how tiny it is amazing. Now, if you are in the UK and you want to go along to take a look or get scanned yourself, the exhibition's moving to Waddesdon Manor in Buckinghamshire in October. Details are on the Royal Academy website. Now, the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, has condemned Russian hackers for leaking confidential medical files of US Olympic athletes. They included the tennis players Venus and Serena Williams and the gymnast Simone Biles. A group calling itself Fancy Bears claimed responsibility for the hack of a WADA database. WADA said in a statement that the cyber attacks were an attempt to undermine the global anti-doping system. Well, in Rio, it's day 6 at the Paralympics. More world records have been set. Let's go over to the BBC's Julia Carneiro. Julia, hello to you.
Hi, Karen. I'm talking to you from outside the Paralympic Park. It is a very hot day here in Rio, but still fans are streaming in and out. I'm outside the velodrome, you can see there, where there was lots of action, both in the Paralympics and the Olympics. In the cycling, over there is the tennis center, and this was really packed over the weekend with record attendance, over 300,000 people, and also a new record perhaps expected for the next weekend when all the tickets here are sold out. But let me bring you some of today's gripping results. Very good results for Paralympics GB, with Georgie Hermitage managing to get her second gold here in Rio in the 400 meters final in the T37 category. Georgie broke a world record and she got the second gold after having won the 100 meters earlier on here in the Paralympics. She has cerebral palsy and she had quit athletics as a teenager, but she was inspired by the London 2012 Games to come back to the sport, and what a comeback. She can still get another gold here in Rio for the 400 meters relay. And also more good news for Paralympics GB from Holly Arnold. She got gold in javelin throw in the F46 category, and she also set a new world record in that category. First, she broke the record with a 41.68 meter throw, and then, not happy to have done that, she went and had a larger throw than that, making it 43.01 meters. Now, here in Rio, also, everyone is talking about the amazing result yesterday in the Athletic Stadium at the 1500 meter final in the T13 category. That's for athletes with visual impairment. Algeria got gold there. Athlete Abdelatif Baka came in first, and he broke the Paralympic world record. But what was remarkable about that everyone here is talking about, was that he also came in faster than the athlete in the Olympics that got gold for that 1500 meters race. So he surpassed the time of the United States' Matthew Centrovich. And the three athletes that came in after that were also faster than Centrovich. So quite a remarkable result here in the Paralympics of Rio. And while there are lots of other results coming up later today in swimming, in athletics, lots of finals and medals to be handed out, and we'll keep you up to date, Karen, with the latest results.
Julia, thank you very much. Yes, that 1500 metres was absolutely amazing. Let's take a look at the medal table as it stands on day 6. China has top spot with 55 golds, 42 silvers and 28 bronzes. Great Britain is in second place. Ukraine is third. The hosts, Brazil, are also still doing well. They're currently in 5th place. You can get the latest from the Paralympic Games on our website for analysis, and there's a sport-by-sport guide. Just go to bbc.com/Paralympics. Now, for US Olympian Ryan Lochte, his dancing debut on primetime TV might not be remembered for the reasons he hoped. The swimmer had just finished performing on the US reality show Dancing with the Stars when two protesters rushed onto stage to interrupt the judges' scoring. The men, who were wearing anti-Lochte t-shirts, were arrested for trespassing. Lochte's been suspended from competing for 10 months after he admitted lying about being robbed at gunpoint in Rio. Now, his books have captured the imagination and brought joy to millions of children around the world. The BFG, Willy Wonka and Matilda are just some of the characters from the imagination of the writer Roald Dahl. Born exactly 100 years ago today, nowhere are the celebrations bigger than in Cardiff, where he grew up, as Sian Lloyd now reports.
I is not understanding human beings at all, the BFG said. Mr. Willy Wonka can make marshmallows that taste of violets.
Stories that are loved by millions of children, including pupils at Roald Dahl's former school in Cardiff, reading to celebrate the centenary of his birth, and his work is more popular than ever.
Have you got a favourite story?
The BFG. It has his granddaughter in it and it uses her imagination.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Why do you like that one so much?
Because I like chocolate.
His story began here 100 years ago today. The family home in Cardiff has changed little since Roald Dahl was born in the front bedroom.
His earliest recollections were formed here, and some played a part in the magical stories that he later went on to write.
Ah, said the BFG. I was wondering how long it is before you was asking me that.
Roald Dahl wrote many of his books in a shed at the bottom of his garden, an idea he said he got from the Welsh author Dylan Thomas, who had a writing hut in Larne.
"Oh, you wicked beastly beast," cried Trunky. "Oh, you foul and filthy fiend."
He began writing for children more than 70 years ago. His stories still rank alongside modern-day bestsellers.
He popularised, I think, the children's book as a genre. And now those readers are parents who are passing on that legacy.
Dahl worked closely with the illustrator Quentin Blake.
He used to say you can talk to children about anything as long as it's got humour in it. And I think the drawings are a way of saying you're not to take this too seriously.
And in some schools, the celebrations for what would have been Roald Dahl's 100th birthday have been as colourful as his imagination. Sian Lloyd, BBC News, Cardiff.
Now, a Spanish couple has been reunited with a wedding ring almost 40 years after they lost it while swimming near the Spanish resort of Benidorm. Agustín Aliaga and his wife lost the ring in 1979, just 5 months after they were married. They assumed it was gone forever, so you can imagine their surprise when it was found by a local diver. The woman appealed for help to find the owners on social media, and a relative of the couple recognised the wedding date engraved on the ring. It was finally returned to them, almost 40 years on. If you want to get in touch with us at BBC World News, we're on social media. I'm at Karin BBC on Twitter. You can also find us on Facebook. That is all from the programme. The weather's coming next, but for now, from me, Karin Giannoni, and the rest of the team, goodbye.